And we are live.
Very good.
Okay, Representatives Connolly?
Is she online? She might be online, or she might be.
No, not yet.
Okay,
Okay.
excused. And keep an
Flitner?
eye out for her. She might show up.
Present.
Hallinan?
Here.
LeBeau?
Here.
Ottman?
Here.
Romero Martinez? Stibar?
Present.
Ward?
Here.
Madam Chairwoman Wilson?
Here.
8 present.
Very good. And possibly Representative Connolly by Zoom afterwards. Chairman Perkins, come on up. I'm not sure if you've been before our committee before. Folks, we're going to hear Senate File 85, Child Care Facility Certification Exemption. Looks like a short, sweet little bill. Carry on, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Madam Chairman, for your consideration. Senate File 85, Child Care for Certification Exemption. I think this is a clean little bill, and so far it has had no anyone speak in opposition to this bill, but it's only halfway through the process, so you never know. What this does is it comes back, just a little background, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. We have a number of, we provide a lot of aftercare, after school and before school care around our state. And most of those individuals are not licensed as child care providers for good reasons. They don't provide infants. They're usually at school-age children. There's a lot of reasons that they don't provide licensing. But if you go to our licensing exemption statute, the department over the years has kind of said, well, they're kind of sort of ranches or farms offering services to children who are homeless, delinquent, or have intellectual disability, and then there's summer camps operated by nonprofit organizations, but there's nothing that deals directly with after-school care. And so this is, the programs that do this, some of them are large national programs like YMCA or Boys and Girls Club. Some of them are community programs that are run by churches or local communities or local boards, cooperative boards, and so joint boards. And so it's from Newcastle to Evanston, from Cody to Cheyenne. And there's after that. So we've worked on this with After School Alliance. We've worked on this with the director, who actually, as they had some language they want us to run. I didn't think it did a very good job. I went to the director and asked her what she thought about it, and she actually provided most of the language that's in the bill. And so this simply provides that exemption so that they aren't regulated. They'll still have to meet and satisfy inspections and codes and qualifications from electrical and police and fire and other safety and health codes in their local communities, but they will no longer be under the licensing purview of the Department of Family Services, and which is actually, in working with the director, they've actually wanted this bill to make sure that everybody was in compliance, including that. And that's other than that, it just simply creates that exemption that is primarily when school is not in session, including before or after school and during summer months. That's a little squishy because with the pandemic, sometimes you never knew when kids were in school. You never know when kids, and some districts are off on Fridays and some aren't off on Fridays. So it's a little bit squishy on purpose to make sure that nobody gets caught up on the technicality of that they're in school when other people might not be in school. Exclusively reserved children required to attend school under the appropriate Wyoming statute, organized to promote childhood learning, child and youth development, educational enrichment, recreational character building activities. They have to adhere to all local health, safety, and fire codes or regulations. So that's the bill. That's what it does, and it's that simple and benefits, I think, and clears up some ambiguity on behalf of probably close to 25,000 kids across the state.
Okay. Questions for Chairman Perkins? So I guess I do have a question. I assume that they would still be held to any kind of requirements for reporting child abuse and that sort of thing. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with their licensure. It has to do with
right. They would still be
rest of life.
mandatory reporters, and they have, if you go out and talk to these folks. I served on the board of one of these organizations for over 20 years. Not on the board anymore. But they go to great lengths to provide great child protection. Try to adhere to best practices of always having, and always never allowing individuals to be alone with a child without, always at least 2 adults there. The other health and safety. So there's a long list, and even the independent ones. Many of them belong to the After School Alliance, and so. These are kids, so yes, they're mandatory reporters. All of those things are still in place, I believe.
Okay. All right, then who else have we got? Any other legislators that want to testify on this bill? Agency, Director Schmidt, are you here for this? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Corinne Schmidt, and I'm the Director of the Department of Family Services. As the chairman pointed out, we worked with him on this language, and I'm really just here if you have any further questions.
Questions for Director Schmidt? So, Dr. Schmidt, just so that we can refresh our memories, what let's say paperwork or hoops are these organizations, what would they be exempt from doing after this bill is passed that they might have, if you had rigidly adhered to the requirement, had to do?
Madam Chairwoman, the rules of childcare licensing would have applied to them. So there's kind of an extensive list that have anywhere from supervision ratios to fire safety codes, health codes, et cetera. So we have a fairly comprehensive list of rules that would apply. Those rules are mostly in place for our child care assistance programs. And this group of providers doesn't always participate with child care assistance. If they did, then those rules would apply in order for them to be eligible to receive the assistance.
Okay. More questions for Director Schmidt? No? Okay, we're speedy this morning. Any more public testimony on this bill? Well then, yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, we have one person online who
Okay.
would like to testify.
Let that person in, please.
I'm admitting Michelle Sullivan.
Okay. Ms. Sullivan, welcome. Introduce yourself, if you would, for the committee.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michelle Sullivan, and I'm the director of the Wyoming After School Alliance. I'm based in Sheridan, Wyoming. And our role is to advocate for and support for the improved quality of opportunities for all kids in Wyoming to have very high quality out-of-time experiences. We stand in support of this bill and believe it will help eliminate and clarify the language, but also offer ultimately more opportunities to school-age young people and working families over the course of after school time and summer. And we also, just to answer a question about quality, have developed a set of quality standards, program quality standards that we help to advocate for those programs that are not necessarily receiving assistance from the state.
Okay, questions for Ms. Sullivan? None, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, no other testimony on the bill? All right, then public testimony is closed. Any discussion on the, or do I hear a motion? Okay, moved by Hallinan, seconded by Stivar. Is there any discussion on the bill? Okay, question being called. Bonnie, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Connolly,
Excused.
Flitner.
Aye.
Hallinan.
Aye.
LeBeau.
Aye.
Ottman.
Aye.
Romero Martinez.
Aye.
Stivar.
Aye.
Warp.
Aye.
Madam Chairwoman.
Aye.
Madam Chairwoman, we have 8 ayes, 1 excused.
Okay, good. So I did talk to Chairman Harshman, and he seemed, I didn't know whether he was going to be here this morning or not. He remembers that he is on the bill and thought that he might run it. Otherwise, Representative Flitner, if Chairman Harshman fails. Anyway, we'll resolve that. Thank you so much, Chairman. Okay, Chairman Case, we have a breakfast of chairmans this morning. Chairmen, sorry.
Scott Meyer join me at the bench.
Certainly, come on up. So, for the benefit of those listening in, we are going to hear about Senate File 76, Financial Exploitation of Vulnerable Adults. Welcome, Chairman Case.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I was just sitting here thinking that when I served on the House Labor Committee, the chairman in the House was Senator Perkins' mom. And so Dorothy Perkins was the chairman.
Old home week here, isn't it?
Yeah, it goes back a bit. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I bring you Senate File 76, Financial Exploitation of Vulnerable Adults. In a nutshell, what this bill does is require banks and other financial institutions to investigate and report suspected situations where a vulnerable adult is being financially exploited. And if they do that, it provides that some protection to the bank for making that declaration and reporting the thing. But if you're thinking about it from like the high level, banks know their customers very well. Especially in our towns, small towns across Wyoming. They understand that changes that people go through as we age or maybe other events, and they can sometimes have an inkling, or more than an inkling, that someone is being taken advantage of. And this creates an obligation for those banks. You know, they have a moral obligation now, but this creates an obligation for them to report the situation. It's at the employee level, at the bank level, and the reporting is to the Department of Family Services and can extend from that. But you can imagine the situation. Mrs. Jones has been a customer of the bank for 20 years. The tellers know her well. Her condition perhaps has deteriorated a bit, and perhaps she's become confused, and now someone else is representing Mrs. Jones. And it just doesn't seem quite right because they're making purchases the transactions don't fit the pattern that Mrs. Jones had before. So there's a suspected that Mrs. Jones is being taken advantage of. That's kind of what this is about. And in a nutshell, at a high level, or however you prefer.
I think it would be helpful to go through the features of the bill.
Okay, so this is in Title 13. Title 13 is the bank statutes, banks, banking, and finance. And it creates 6 sections, 401 through 406. And the article is called The Protection of Vulnerable Adults. The definitions, department is the Department of Family Services. We have a definition of exploitation and financial exploitation, Madam Chairman, at the bottom of page 2. And just to tell you what financial exploitation means, the wrongful or unauthorized taking, withholding, appropriation, or use of the money, assets, or other property, or the identifying information of a person, or B, an act or omission by a person, including through the use of a power of attorney on behalf of or as the conservator or guardian of another person to, 1, obtain control through deception, intimidation, fraud, or undue influence. 2 is to convert the money, assets, or other property of the person to deprive them of the ownership of that. Financial institutions are defined at the line 17 through 19. This is a broad definition of financial institutions. It includes credit unions who support this bill and things like that. Then on lines 21 through 22, vulnerable adult. That's as defined in the Department of Family Services statute and our adult protection and neglect. Next section created is 1310-402. This is the reporting requirement. It applies, first paragraph, it applies to bank employees. So, you know, if an employee of a bank suspects something, they have to notify their employer. And if the financial institution, which is the employer, is notified, then they have to do a little bit of an assessment and then submit a report to the key is on lines 14 through 16 on page 4. If the bank believes that financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult has occurred, is occurring, or has been attempted, the financial institution shall assess the suspected financial exploitation and submit a report to the department in the same manner as they have some other reporting areas, and we're using that 35-20-103. And there's some timelines. They have to do it. Shall submit the report is required, and I'm going on to page 5. On the date the financial institution completes the financial institution's assessment, or 5 business days after the institution has been notified of the suspected That's the only report that's required of the financial institution. That's all that C says. And at the bottom of the page, lines 20, each financial institution shall adopt internal policies, programs, plans, or procedures for the employees to make the reports and them to conduct the assessment. And if you look under the middle paragraph on page 6, the policies, programs, plans, or procedures adopted under subsection D of this section may authorize the financial institution to report the suspected financial exploitation to other appropriate agencies and entities in addition to the Department of Family Services. This could include the Attorney General, law enforcement, anything like that. So on line 17, we create section 1310-403. I'm still on page 6, which allows the financial institution to notify third parties if they have filed a report of their suspected financial exploitation. Third party, that's the law enforcement, things like that. Page 7, section 404, the financial institution is authorized to place a hold on transactions provided they comply with the reporting to the Department of Family Services. They can stop the exploitation from happening. They can only do it for, they have to have, in order to submit a hold, they have to have submitted a report and they have to have cause to believe that it's related to exploitation. On to page 8, this hold, lines 5 through 8, the hold is good for 10 days. It's not any longer than that. People are very sensitive about stopping banking transactions, believe me, but this allows for a 10-day hold. And this is initiated by the bank, providing the other conditions are met. This hold under paragraph C on page 8 may be extended at the request of an investigating agency. And then, so, that's not the bank's motions anymore. That is like law enforcement. It's telling, there's really something to this. Let's extend the hold out to 30 days, okay? And I go on to page 9. This is kind of a key for our friends in the banking industry is immunity. If you look on the paragraph A, an employee of a financial institution who provides notification, a financial institution that submits a report or provides notification to a third party following this law, on and on down the line, 15 is immune from any civil or criminal liability arising from the notification, report, testimony, or participation in the judicial proceeding unless, this is lines 18 and 19, unless the employee or the financial institution acted in bad faith or with a malicious purpose. So they don't have an immunity in those cases. There's a bit about records on page 10 and page 11, section 2, the Department of Family Services has to help by developing some rulemaking. And section 3, it's effective July 1st, 2020, except for subsection B. And line 10, sections 2 and 3 of this act are effective immediately. That's the bill, Madam Chairwoman. It's supported by the bankers. It was brought to me by the Wyoming Bankers Association. Scott Meyer is their lobbyist and executive director.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll hear from Mr. Meyer shortly. Let's just see if there's any questions for Chairman Case to start with. Keeping in mind that Mr. Meyer can probably answer the specifics of banking. Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Case, did you consult Department of Health and the DD division on this?
Chairman Case.
Madam Chairwoman, the division testified in the Senate committee, and I did not talk to the Department of Health. The law about exploitation and is in the Department of Family Services statute.
Follow up, Madam Chairman.
Representative Stivar.
But on the guardians, you've got guardians written in here, and that's where I have heartburn. As a guardian myself, I have to take care and make sure that individual is taken care of. He's not getting, buying knives, computers, whatever that he's, and then by this, I'm taking his assets I'm not his payee. We have somebody else to be a payee just for this itself. But, how does that work into this?
Chairman Case, and I think you're a guardian yourself, or have been.
Madam
anyway.
Chairwoman, I am a guardian myself and I have been for maybe 15 years, I think. So this could encompass folks that have some responsibility for vulnerable adults. It could encompass a caregiver. I suppose it could encompass a guardian. It's not really aimed at guardians, but they might be someone that, I think guardians do a really good job most of the time. It's a thankless job. But perhaps it doesn't always go like you think it should. And so I don't think you should exclude guardians, representative, or anything like that, but people that get close to other people might be a guardian. I kind of doubt it for most of the time. But things like caregivers, volunteers, it's a funny way that people get close to other people and take advantage of them.
Evil daughters-in-law. Representative Steinbauer.
Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman. All right, let's say, just hypothetically, I'm on my daughter's account. She has MS. I have medical power of attorney over her. I'm the only one on the account and her. Her MS is acting up. I go in and draw her money out, give it to her. And then I turn around and sell something. And I go back to the bank because we share at the same bank, and I deposit around the same amount back into my account. Then all of a sudden I'm going to get, on that aspect, by this, I could get in trouble because they could assume that I was exploiting my daughter. Is that correct?
Chairman Case.
Well, Madam Chairwoman, I suppose there's some kind of a theoretical possibility. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but if there is no exploitation, the worst thing that happened in this case is there's been a hold placed on a transaction, possibly for 10 days. At a practical level, I don't really see the merit of that, to be really honest.
Representative Flitner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And Chairman Case or Scott, either of you can answer this. I see this bill as a way of protecting against the possibility of being scammed. I actually have a girlfriend whose mother lost her entire life savings as a YDOT employee, was retired in another state. Her bank tried to stop her. They warned her a couple of times. She was in the early stages of dementia. So there were no family members that the bank was aware of that they could contact. So in a case like that, where they had tried to stop her, I see this as helpful because as bankers, as her financial institution, they surely understood that someone was taking her for everything she had. And they tried in vain to help, but by the time her daughter was involved, it was too late. So are you incapable of doing that presently? Does this bill require you to do that? And I don't see this I see this as a very good thing, but if you could just maybe speak to that.
Let's pause there. So we haven't really had Mr. Meyer testify yet. So I feel like I should probably at least have him, if we're going to ask him questions, maybe we should just have you introduce yourself and make a few remarks. And then I'll let you answer Representative Flitner's question.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is Scott Meyer, President and CEO of the Wyoming Bankers Association. Let me just point out a couple of things that as I've heard the questions and things that are going on, but there is a federal Senior Safe Act that does provide for reporting of transactions. And those are what they call the Suspicious Activity Reports, or SARs. And so those will happen. And I do have with me the chairman of my board and a fellow banker, Tom Bass, Wyoming Bank and Trust, that will talk to you a little bit about those. But this bill is different in that, unlike the Federal Senior Safe Act, this covers more of the realistic situations that I've heard discussed here today, where the federal government does not really do that. And it includes where the federal government does the pausing or temporary halting of transactions within the accounts, or to the accounts where somebody has transferred money to their own account, and allows them to do that. Like I said, the Federal Safe Act does not allow for that. So that's why this bill helps a little bit. Going through some of the questions that I've listened to, if I can, I'll just switch hats a little bit because prior to working with the Wyoming Bankers Association, I've been practicing law for over 25 years, and I deal a lot with guardians, and I deal a lot with estate planning and what have you. With respect to guardians, the bill is not really directed towards guardians so much because guardians have an obligation. Once you're appointed as a guardian, you've got an obligation to the court. You do have to report, you do have to account, you do have to deal with that kind of information. So this is more dealt with a vulnerable adult, whether it's an elderly person, which often is the case, but also somebody that is handicapped that can't take care of, from a stroke or an accident or something that can't take care of their own financial situation. So it does expand that a little bit more and say this is the areas that we're looking at. I do think that the reporting requirements are very key. Some of the discussions I've had with folks at the other end of the hall down there is what happens when somebody suspects that. Well, it's not just the bank turns around and says, well, we're just going to put a lock on your account. They have to do a report. They do have to notify DFS. And there is other opportunities for them to notify law enforcement if they think it's a big enough issue. But in fact, that requires them to do that before they put a hold on that account. This, in fact, does do the one thing that we are suspicious of or we're suspecting of is whether, Junior is buying, and I've seen this too, Junior's buying for his 96-year-old grandmother a Ford F-350. Not so sure that that's required. You want to be able to have some of those conversations. There very well may be a good reason for doing that, and maybe they could explain that, but this at least allows them to have the investigation. There's also situations where you look at that Representative Flittner had brought up, and in my role as an attorney and now as working with the Banking Association, I can't tell you how many times we've seen the Nigerian scams and what have you come in there, and how do you stop this? When you know the person really doesn't understand, but they really believe that they're going to get this money. Well, I'd really like to figure out a way either to get a DFS involved or law enforcement or something, because usually what happens is that money is gone before they do anything. I will readily admit that there will be situations where, and we've had these things come up where, no, it all turned out to be okay, and a customer is very angry. But I'd rather than be angry for putting a hold on the account than turn around being angry that we just let $150,000 go out the door. So that's where I think the balancing comes in. I think Senator Case is exactly right. There is one of the things that the financial institutions are looking for is immunity for turning this over. We don't want to be sued by the grandson. We don't want to be sued by somebody that has power of attorney for doing something that we think is right, even though we're obligated to do on law. But if, in fact, it is because the financial institution says, you know what, we think that your grandmother is anti-firearms, and so we're going to lock this account just to be ornery, no, then that's malicious stuff, and that the bank is liable, or the financial institution is liable. So I think that this does a lot of things that are very good for Wyoming, and it does very good for the banks, but especially for our vulnerable adults. That's why this whole bill was brought up. And I think that I've covered most of those questions, but I certainly would stand for any more.
So let me go back to Representative Flittner because I kind of lost track a little bit there. Did he answer your question? Okay, Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I like to know that there's something that's going to be corrected by a bill when it's proposed. The problem now, these people that are being taken advantage of, that as a banker, that. What do you do now with those people? What do you do to protect them?
Mr. Meyer.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Hallinan, I will tell you, and maybe this is also a good time to have Mr. Bass come up because he is a banker, but I will tell you that right now, there's not a lot we can do. We can turn that over to the authorities or to DFS, and we can say there it is, but we have no authority right now to put a hold on those accounts. So right now, there is an opportunity to turn that information over. But by the time something happens, that's where the money's gone or the funds have been transferred or transactions have occurred that we cannot back up.
Madam Chairman, follow up. It seems to me that the most important aspect of this bill is the immunity that is offered to the bank in this case. Is that true? Do you believe that's the truth? That's the real meaning of this bill? It offers immunity to the bank to turn these people over to the.
Mr. Mayor?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Hallinan, I don't believe that that is exactly right. I like the fact that they have the opportunity and have the immunity protection. But the key portion of this bill is that it allows the financial institutions to put a hold on those accounts. What we don't want is the money to go out and say, doggone it, we should have stopped that, or we wish we could have stopped it, but we couldn't. This bill allows them to put that hold on. And as Senator Case had pointed out, yes, there's a 10-day requirement, but it can't be any longer than that. We don't want to have, utility bills getting bounced or whatever that we think are important in that. But if DFS or law enforcement comes in and says, no, we think there's a bigger game at foot here, we'll ask for 30 days, then that's fine. But this is what this bill does. The most important aspect of it is allows the financial institutions to put brakes on this.
More questions for, yes, Representative Worf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple quick questions, and I'm assuming some of this is already covered, but on page 9, under the immunity, it talks about bad faith or malicious purpose. I'm assuming that's defined somewhere. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Worf, that's kind of like in the law world where I practice, what is reasonable? And what is reasonable and what is malicious and what have you is all determined by the fact finder. So that would be a court or a jury or what have you is determined what those terms are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
Representative
I
Worf?
guess if I may follow up, it goes back to on page 2 under definitions on line 18 where you talk about wrongful or unauthorized taking. I hate to say it, but in a prior life, I've dealt a lot with attorneys, and one of the things that I dealt with all the time is arbitrary and capricious. And I worry somewhat about the language, and I'm not an attorney, and it's been a while since I've stayed in a Holiday Inn Express, but I have some cause for concern that we are giving the bank or the banks a new authority. We're giving them immunity against their actions. And I believe this is good intentions, and I do think it's warranted. What I worry about is this will interject the state government, if you wish, into people's lives. And I may have a grandma that maybe for whatever reason, I've always taken care of her, I've always done things. She knows I've got a truck that's got 500,000 miles on it, and I've been running her around my whole life. Maybe she decided, even though she's 93, maybe she decided before she goes, she wants to buy me a truck. Now, I look at it, that's a very personal decision. Now, I know people can be exploited, but I worry about what happens when it causes something to be flagged. Now it gets interjected, and what would have been something that probably would have never happened within the family. Now all of a sudden I've got siblings saying, well, that isn't fair that grandma was giving that to Bob. And that's the only cause for pause or concern that I have is I can see this opening the door. We're casting that net so wide. I worry that we're going to interject things into personal things that I really don't think the state has any business. Now, I want to see this go forward because I do. I want to protect the people. I know that some of these vulnerable adults are being exploited and taken advantage of. And I guess one of the questions I had, and it goes back to on page 8 where you talk about the time constraints. It says that, it'll expire 10 business days after the date of the hold is placed. And I guess the question I had is, if an amendment were to be brought forward that struck expires and put not to exceed 10 days, does that impede the bank's ability that if all of a sudden you flag something. You think this just doesn't make sense, but you talk to, my grandma, and she says, yeah, I wanted to do that. Rather than be obligated to hold those funds up for 10 days, could you say, well, okay, we looked into it and release it without holding up the money for 10 days? This would still give the banks the ability to hold it 10 days to get to the bottom of that, but what it doesn't obligate the bank to keep it for 10 days on hold. And so that's me trying to find a way to snake through this and maneuver it to where if in fact the bank finds out that it was maybe something that seemed suspicious, but when you looked into it, you felt like, okay, we can let it go. Rather than being obligated to hold those funds for 10 days, maybe it's only 2 days, however long it takes to kind of get comfort. But that's something I think, if it's a truck that I'm trying to buy.
Okay, Representative Ward,
Well-
take a breath there for a second. Let's let Mr. Meyer answer the 10-day
I just think it's
question.
important to understand, 10 days, that truck could be gone, and it now could cost thousands of dollars more to find the vehicle that we had lined up. So there is some cost to that period. That's the only reason why I'm trying to shorten it, Madam Chair.
Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator Wharf, I will tell you, you give me a whole lot to talk about. And I don't want to keep the committee any longer than I have to, but I will tell you, you're probably your first mistake is you're trusting all the lawyers. That's always a scary situation. One of the areas that I think Senator Case had brought up, and I think it's important to note in here, is that not only does the bill allow you to have this investigation period, which they have to report after they do their investigation. So the bank or the financial institution can do that investigation, so we can figure that out and see what's going on. There's also a provision in the bill that we can notify a third party. So if your grandmother comes in and says, by the way, here's my third party, and it's going to be my son, or it's going to be my nephew, or whatever, then if the financial institution does see some suspected transactions and whatever, before they do anything, they can call that third party and say, are you aware that Mrs. Jones is doing this? Certainly, yes, her son is doing this. He does need a new truck. We have been talking about this. It's okay. Then that alleviates the bank of a little bit more concern. If they still have some concern, they still have to file the report. So in that time period, they can do that. As to your amendment, I don't have any problems really saying that it up to or not to exceed. Understand that what we're trying to do is give DFS and law enforcement the opportunity to come in and do whatever they have to do if they really do think that there's something nefarious going on. More often than not, you will probably find out that everything is probably legitimate, and especially if you have that third person that you can check. But as I expect, Mr. Bass will tell you that that's not always the case. And I can tell you I've filed enough of the SARs in my life to say, some of these may have been a little bit on the borderline. Some of them were just quite blatant, and we know what's going on. But the idea is that we're trying to protect these people. And that's why we're trying to go from where we're at.
More questions for Senator Case or Mr. Meyer? Representative Hotman.
Madam Chairman, Senator Case and Mr. Meyer, I believe very strongly that this is an issue because it happened in our family also. But what I'm wondering about, because there is a delicate balance here of when to intercede in a family's business. What if there isn't a third party? Also, I do like the checks with the banks because I've had suspicious activity that when something was stolen, that I've had that. But how is this going to go? How are the banks going to investigate? Who determines if it's to be given over to law enforcement, and how are they to proceed making charges with something like this?
Mr.
Thank
Meyer?
you.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Ottman, I will tell you that, this is not my favorite area. I don't like to pass the buck. But if I could have Mr. Bass come up and talk to you from the bank, because he can tell you exactly the logistics of how that works.
Okay, we'll bring up Mr. Bass. And there should be Chairman Case can probably help you with your microphone if it's not on.
Hey, Tom. Thank you. How are you? Good. How are you?
Mr. Bass, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Bass. I've been a banker for 43 years, and I've seen a number of these scams. Senator Case laid it out really well. We're a small bank. We've got 2 branches here and in Burns, and we know our customers. We get to know our customers very well. But there are a number of scams that I've seen, and if you can indulge me, I can go over a couple of scams that I've seen throughout my career.
All right, briefly, probably. We've probably could add to the collection, but.
Yeah. One, several years ago, a gentleman went to the teller line, wanted to withdraw about $8,000. He seemed very nervous, and the teller did a great job, brought him to my office, and I got talking with him. He was very standoffish at first, and I said, "Sir, is there something that I can help you with?" He said, "Well, I got a call from someone from the FBI, and they wanted me to withdraw some money. They suspect a teller at your bank is doing some illegal things, so I was going to get the money, give it to the FBI officer at my house, and they're going to test the money, look at the serial numbers, and thank goodness we stopped it. I called the local enforcement, and they went to staked out his house. They probably got spooked, but we saved. And this is one of many scams that I've seen throughout my career. So,
Representative Ottman, you want to restate your question for Mr. Bass as far as the procedures?
Yes, how do you determine what is suspicious? And then what is the follow-up from that? Is there, you said investigative, who investigates? And if there is, say, a senior person or another person that lives independently, whether they may be going into stages where they don't always make the right determinations, how does all that work? And then with law enforcement, what kind of enforcement could they have, or charges, or how would they be involved? Thank you.
Madam Chair, through you, Representative, we have a full-time compliance officer at the bank, and senior management of the bank gets together, and it's on a case-by-case. We do investigations. We've had people come into our bank with phones. The scammer is on the phone live, and we've talked to them, and we'll maybe pass a note and saying, is someone, because we can sense that something is amiss. And so we'll talk to them, and we've saved a number of people from getting scammed. So we do it on a case by case, but we do have a full-time compliance officer that monitors accounts like this on a daily basis.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Page 5, line 20. Each financial institution shall adopt internal policies, programs, places, and procedures. To me, that's too broad. Because each bank's going to be able to choose how they want to do this.
Mr. Bass, any thoughts, or Mr. Meyer?
Madam Chairman, Representative Stivar, I will tell you that that language is in there that says that they must do it. Every bank, every credit union, every financial institution out there has these policies. They're required by federal law. This is just to cover to make sure that they have them under the state statute, but everybody has those. Each bank will be different. In fact, each bank branch may be different as to what they're doing. As Mr. Bass pointed out with his bank, Cheyenne and Burns, there may be different requirements in Burns than there is in Cheyenne. I doubt it, but there could be. But every bank has their policies and procedures on how they do that. And not only do they have their policies and procedures, the regulators come in to make sure that they have those policies and procedures. there is federal statute regarding some of that stuff, FinCEN and what have you, that looks at these things and see where they are. But this really adds more requirements to make sure it's solidified that the banks do in fact have that policies and procedures in there, and they have to show that to the regulators.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a few now. So on page 7, where it says about may place a hold on any transaction that involves an account. So I don't think we've really defined account here. And what I'm wondering, and certainly I'm aware of problems like this that have arisen. My mom was fooled by one of those, "Hi, Grandma, I'm stuck here at this track meets," and so I get that. But when it says account, banks, many people have their credit card through the bank, and certainly most of us sadly know that when your credit card is hacked and your bank has to send you a new credit card, all your credit card functionality is screwed up for weeks. So I just wonder if you could talk first a little bit about that, because if we're just thinking of, okay, my checking account and it has got $2,000 in it or something, that's one thing. But if you put a hold on my credit card for 10 days, it's going to mess up a lot of other things that might not be my purchase of the truck or something like that. So any thoughts, I don't know, Mr. Bank, or Mr. Bass or Mr. Meyer, as far as definition of the accounts or how that would work with credit cards?
Madam Chair, Tom Bass again. We don't directly issue credit cards. I know a lot of the credit card companies will call, and they've got amazing technology on how they can spot a fraud. I had it happen to me last year, and they got a call, and things happen quickly. They'll send out a credit card. What more banks will see will be debit cards, funds coming directly out of a debit card. But credit cards, we don't directly. Larger banks do issue them, but most of the community banks have a third party that they go through.
So are you saying that, and I don't recall, but so if I were banking at a particular community bank and I couldn't, and they had their credit card through, and I don't like to name, proper names here, but a larger banking company that those large national credit card companies would not be affected by this. Are there let's say, there are some national banks that have branches in Wyoming and probably have credit cards. Just because it doesn't affect your bank with 2 branches, might it not affect one of the national banks that has an account in Wyoming? And, there are some, and then my credit card is stopped too, or can you talk a little, it just seems
Madam
like a pain.
Chairwoman, members of the committee, I will tell you that, first of all, the bill only deals with those organizations that that have offices here and that are subject to Wyoming law. So if you're one of the bigger banks that have issues of credit cards and they don't have an office here, and Wyoming just doesn't have any jurisdiction over them, so it might not apply to them. I will tell you that the question that what the credit cards do. I have an elderly mother that lives in Lander, and she insisted that she have new furniture, which apparently became my responsibility. I'm not sure how, but it did. So I tried to order furniture, and I won't go down that story, trying to get things and how long it takes. But my wife and I finally found some furniture for her, and we put it on a credit card. It took it exactly 30 seconds before the credit card company was texting me and calling me saying, "Why are you making this purchase? This is an awful large amount. What are you doing?" And we just explained, no, it's good. We understand what we're doing. Fine. Then the charge was allowed. So I do think the credit card companies are even faster at this, trying to pick these things out. They do have compliance officers and risk assessment people that do this as a full-time basis, and they understand when these things happen. The other thing I'll point out too is that with respect to some of these payments, if the financial institution looked at this and suspected that there was some kind of a nefarious deal going on, and they wanted to make a report, and they do everything they can, and they want to put a hold on the account, they don't have to put a hold on everything on the account. There can be a partial hold. What we're really concerned about is the $10,000 that's going to the young man that's stuck in Mexico and he's your grandson and he needs to get home and you've heard the stories. That we can put a hold on, but that doesn't mean that your utility bills are put a hold on. That doesn't mean that, your credit card payments that you have automatically set up there or whatever, your mortgage payments. That doesn't mean that has to be held. It's the specific hold that we're looking for to make sure that we can stop that transaction.
Okay, super. So then I'm sure we'll hear from DFS, so I'll ask them about a question for that later. The other question that I have, and it's a little bit along the lines of Representative Worf's, but as far as the bank policy, and Mr. Bass used the word detecting something amiss. And, not every teller or banker's idea of amiss is necessarily everybody else's idea of amiss. And so, for example, and this, and again, I don't want to refer to a specific bank, but I think it's pretty well known that, a year ago, January, there was a certain national bank that turned over credit card records to the FBI without a subpoena because they thought it was amiss that their credit card holders were in Washington, D.C. And so those people have had a lot more than a 10-day hold. Some of them, I think they have a lifelong hold probably. But so I guess just and like my local bank, and I have got like 5 accounts at it. They know me very well. They say my name when I even just coming in the door. But there's also a lot of turnover in those teller positions. I've been banking there 20 years. I couldn't tell you how many tellers that they've had, but even in a year, there are new tellers. Especially after they're robbed, then they get new tellers. And sadly, for which I don't blame them. But so, suppose I developed a sudden paranoia that the ATMs were going to go down like they are in Russia and decided I should stock up on cash. And they thought that this was, where it says a way inconsistent with my past behavior or something. And I don't know, I just, one 25-year-old teller's idea of amiss is not the same idea of amiss as some, guy who's been running a bank for 60 years. I just find it, and I understand that, you might investigate or have an inquiry and then say, well, no, so-and-so young teller, that lady is just that kind of whack job that stashes cash in her house. But nonetheless, it would be kind of annoying to be investigated in that way. So talk to me a little bit more about that, Mr. Bass.
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. During COVID, a lot of folks would come into the bank and they were nervous, a lot of uncertainty. And we had people inquire about getting cash. And we talked to them. And
God bless you.
Bless you. And we talked to them directly. And the tellers have training, and new accounts folks have training also, online training. And if there's anything in our bank that is a little different, they're told to talk to their supervisor, senior management. So we've had things like that happen. We've had a couple recently with the Russia invasion, and people get nervous, and I understand that. But if they take cash out, we in large amounts, and there's a robbery or a fire in their house, it's gone. So we talk to them about that. So.
Great. Any more questions for the folks here? And I suppose we will hear from more in the audience, no doubt. Representative LeBeau.
Yeah. Thank you. I like the bill. I have a couple questions, and a lot of my colleagues kind of touched on it, but so we're talking about vulnerable adults, and this is about relationships. And I hear clearly we're rural. Most of us tend to have relationships with our banks, and they kind of know the history and relationships with that. And I think this bill covers that. I just kind of wanted to touch on page 5 there on the bottom. And I want to go back to the adopt on pages, lines 20 and 21. So adopting internal policies, programs, plans, or procedures. And I like the answer, and I think it needs to be broad, and there needs to be flexibility, and each bank's going to do it differently. And I know there's federal law that requires regulators to come in and make sure that they have a baseline of what that is. But my question is, can you tell me why the programs and plans are included in here? Couldn't just the policies and procedures cover that? Or does it need to be defined programs and plans? And could you give me examples of programs and plans? Why would you need to include that? Why isn't just the policies and procedures going to cover the programs and plans?
Okay, Mr. Meyer or Mr. Bass?
Yeah, Representative Chairwoman, or Madam Chairwoman, Representative LeBeau, I will tell you that is language just to make sure we don't have anybody sneaking in there with something else. Well, you don't have a program, you don't have a plan. It's all the internal policies, those are the ones that are set. And so it's one of those from the legal world, we're making sure we've covered everything that any aspect that somebody tries to call it something else.
Any follow-up, Representative LeBeau?
And you answered my question about the 10 days hold, and I kind of like my colleague, Representative Worf, not to exceed 10 days. And I have a good relationship with my bank, and I'd rather have them err on to be safe rather than sorry. And it's simple. I've, traveled, I've gone out of the country, and they're concerned. But I'll let them know, hey, I'm going out of the country for a week. It's where I'm going to be. It's just a phone call because I have that relationship with them. So relationships matter in this bill. What I would like on page 9 there, lines 18 and 19, the bad faith or malicious purpose, that was brought up too. And I understand the concern about particularly protecting an employee. And I know you got to protect an employee if they're doing everything right as an employee, what they're doing their due diligence. Do you have examples, or what is the data on how many employees act on bad faith or malicious purpose? Is it a problem? Is it rampant? So I know there was a concern there, but do you have examples?
Mr. Meyer.
Madam Chairman, Representative LeBeau, I will tell you that I don't have any specific examples. That is one of those areas that if you have a teller or somebody that has a malicious reason, that's why they have the investigation done by the bank. And if they turn that over to DFS or whatever, they can do a look at this and see where it is. Is it really because you don't like somebody because of their actions or their Facebook post or their political bend or what have you? I don't know, but that's why they have the investigation. The idea is that if the bank were to follow through with that and say, geez, I think we ought to we ought to lock Scott Meyer's account because he deals with legislators and we don't like that, and so we're going to lock it up. That's where the malicious activity comes in, because it really does not have any bearing on that particular customer or on the request that's being made. And so if you're doing that kind of stuff and it is malicious, then the financial institution is going to stand for that.
Follow-up.
I apologize, Mr. Banker.
Mr. Bass.
Yeah.
Tom Bass.
Have you fired an employee that acted on bad faith or malicious purposes?
I have not.
Mr. Bass.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
All the Laramie County employees, I'm sure, are very good. It's another county somewhere. Representative Ottman, did you have a question?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'm just to clear this up in my mind, so I appreciate your patience. In this day and age, we have a lot of people, neighbors or whatever, and before too, you could trust a neighbor to come and help a loved one that was older or needed help with things or writing checks or whatever, and that's been a good thing. That's been a neighbor. But these days, it's been my experience, that there's a lot of home health care and stuff, and not to denigrate the office or the job because they do wonderful things. But just to say there are even family members or from organizations that come in and take over these responsibilities, and a lot of times just, get a little frivolous with things. How is that handled? And once it is handled, like say it goes to DFS, after that, is that account cleared, or is that person still deemed that they need to be under the observation of an agency? Thank you.
Mr. Meyer, so I guess that would be sort of as if there were an ongoing relationship, how would that be flagged? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. First off, yes. How would that, because it could be that this person says, oh, yes, let's do this or this or this, and things are going away. But after, say there is a problem, there's an investigation, it is deemed that it is a problem and possibly breaking the law, or what law would that be specifically? But after all of that happens, how is the individual, the adult, how are they then perceived? Are they still in the system? Are they let go, or what is the follow-up on that? Thank you.
Mr. Meyer.
Madam Chairman, Representative Ottman, I will tell you that having lived through this a little bit, having a late grandmother that lived in Grable, Wyoming, there were instances where we saw that home health or whatever, the nurses that came in, were taking advantage of her. Now, we can't really do much when she gives away the artwork that she has, or she gives away the family heirlooms or what have you. But then with respect to that person, if they try to do financial transactions and that becomes a flag, then that has to be investigated. Now, whether that person has been investigated before or not may play into a factor as to the assessment or the investigation the bank does. If they were cleared before, that's probably going to be a good indication that we understand exactly, as that investigation probably doesn't take very long. But in fact, if they were not cleared before and there was something nefarious going on, the fact that somebody tried it again will definitely play into it. But it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and each investigation will have to stand on its own. That doesn't mean that you can't use common sense and say, geez, Billy was in here taking money and we got him before, and now we're going to come in here, but we don't see any nefarious acts on this. I think that the financial institution has a right to look at that and to look at the history with that account, but everyone has to stand on their own. Every investigation does. So the bank can't just go, well, it's happened before, so we're just going to put a lock on it. They have to be able to justify it and explain it and do their reports and issue those things to DFS.
So to follow on that, in a situation like that, or, and Mr. Bass may be more appropriate, would that type of situation be something where you would consider, so on page 6, paragraph E, it talks about may authorize reporting to other appropriate agencies and entities. So you might report this situation to the home health agency, let's say, who is employing the investigated person or whatever the case may be. I mean, I assume, the examples given in paragraph E are pretty much law enforcement types, but an entity might also include an employer, wouldn't it?
Madam Chairman, I don't see any reason why not. That would be part of the investigation. So if they have somebody at home health coming in and they suspect that there's some financial transactions that are going on, there's no reason why a bank wouldn't reach out to them. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll provide the answers, but I do think that it allows the bank to make those calls and say, do you know this person? How long have they worked for you? We're just concerned about stuff. My guess is that the only reason they would not is if they probably have some feeling of liability out there someplace as well. But everyone that I've talked to, because like I said, I mentioned my grandmother, the people that came in, they said, no, we had problems with her, we let her go. Okay, that's understanding. Thank goodness she didn't get into her accounts, but that's not unheard of.
Can I add something?
Senator Case.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So that's kind of a really good thing about this bill, I think, is that it kind of nudges the banks to have this obligation, gives them some protection, which makes them more likely to do it. So in the end, I'm guessing that a lot of these people that are exploiting vulnerable adults, they're not just picking on one person. We're only seeing this because they become known through this relationship with the bank. Thank God that happened. But they may be working for an agency and they're in lots of different people's homes. This may not be the only situation, and it might occur in different ways. So then as the investigation of third parties turns towards that individual, we may prevent it from happening to other people. That is like and then there's licensure and there's all those sort of things that maybe get these people out of doing this business. And so that is a good thing.
Okay. More questions for these three? Because I think we'll have some more. Representative Romero Martinez.
Quick question for the banker world, or we've talked a lot about examples, obviously individual, how it could affect an individual. We talked about the Nigerian scams. In my neighborhood, there's a big echo. I mean, it's huge. I mean, that this is happening rampant. Without naming names, even though I could, have you ever seen a situation that involves either a potential homicide or suicide attached to stuff like this? Just yes or no, maybe?
Madam Chair,
Mr.
for
Bass.
you, Representative, no, I have not.
I just wanted to make a point that that's happening.
So I have,
Senator Case.
some of these scams are so unbelievably sophisticated. My former wife, her daughter, she received a call from her daughter. Her daughter was saying, and then somebody else got on the phone and said that she was to withdraw money and to take the money somewhere or her daughter would be killed. And literally it was her daughter's voice, Shanae's voice on the phone. And we were able, real time, because I have contacts in law enforcement, to actually get this situation on a callback and found out. But they are so sophisticated in representing what is happening. You mentioned the one about being a granddaughter being stuck somewhere. They are very sophisticated. And they later had synthesized the voice, and it was coming from outside the United States. And it was unbelievable. I heard it myself, because on a callback with law enforcement. It is unbelievably sophisticated. And law enforcement was able to be on the line at the same time, and they were able to ascertain that there was no way that was involved. That Shirley's daughter was not there where that call was going, and they were able to find where Shirley's daughter was. So they were not connected. So then. But this is so unbelievably sophisticated, and the caller ID looks like everything falls into place, and you're in a panic, and there's a threat, suicide, homicide, and you don't have much time, and it's scary. The world is scary.
Okay. Any more questions for these three?
Thanks.
Okay. We'll take other public testimony, and I think
The
we're maybe.
department's here.
I'm sorry? I'm going to start with the agencies from DFS, seeing as they're mentioned in the bill.
All these seats are very warm.
Good morning again, Director Schmidt.
Good morning again, members of the committee, Madam Chairwoman. As I mentioned, I'm Corin Schmidt, and to just give a few points about this bill, I think one thing that's really important to note is it just gives a little bit of time. It's a pause. So often in these situations and in these investigations, the money can go so quickly. And by the time we're notified or by the time we're able to work with law enforcement and an investigation is complete, then the money is gone. And so it does give a few more tools to both law enforcement and DFS to be able to respond to these types of allegations. Certainly, it requires an investigation, and we work alongside law enforcement when we do these investigations. But ultimately, it's about preserving some of the assets, some of the cash for these vulnerable people who are so susceptible to a lot of exploitation.
Questions for Director Schmidt? Representative Worf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one of the questions I had, and I looked up vulnerable adult, and one of the questions I had is it talks about they have to be 18 years or older. Then it goes on and it says, as a result of advanced age or physical or mental disability. And I guess one of the questions I have is who determines when I become a vulnerable adult? I look at that, I may feel like I'm very sound-minded. Somebody else may think that I'm not. Who is it and when is that determination made? And that's I guess one of the questions I have is, since that's something you deal with DFS, could you answer that for me, please?
Director Schmidt?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Worf, we'll go in and investigate a type of case. If there's somebody who is reported to us that maybe is suspected of being vulnerable, that something is happening to that individual, we will go in and investigate. And I say investigate more in terms of we'll just ask a lot of questions, we'll see how the person is doing. The department in the regard to adults has no ability to take any type of protective custody. So what we do is really help case manage. We'll connect that person, that vulnerable adult with resources. For example, in this situation, we'll contact law enforcement, we'll report to them our suspicions, they'll look into it. Certainly the banks in this case, in this particular legislation, is a really important partner in that, because oftentimes they're going to have information that we don't have and we don't have access to. And by the time then that we were able to look into it because somebody referred them to us, then of course the money is potentially gone. We work closely with ombudsmans, and we work closely with nursing homes and other types of institutions where maybe they have some suspicions that there's some exploitation going on. However, at this time, we have no ability to really do anything other than to contact law enforcement and hopefully contact the bank, but the bank doesn't have any requirement to protect that or to provide that information.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So as we become an older and older society, it only goes to reason that you're going to have more and more people that are getting to that point where they could be determined vulnerable. Is there any concern that this could become such a heavy workload on your agency that it's going to require you to be adding a bunch more people to go out and do these investigations and ascertain whether these people are in fact vulnerable or if they're just older people?
Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Worf, eventually, potentially, but as the demographics shift in our state and we have fewer children, we may have more adults, we're going to see our caseload shift accordingly. At this time, we did not do a fiscal impact on this study, but I do not believe that this is going to have such a significant impact that we would need more caseworkers, but I will take advantage of the opportunity to say that potentially in the future, as we all age, yes, we may need to have more resources to help us protecting those vulnerable adults.
More questions for Director Schmidt? Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Schmidt, just because people have strong will sometimes, and I know bad things happen sometimes that we cannot stop. But if there is a person that it is ascertained that they are vulnerable and say they are approached and said, we believe that we can help you here because there's bad things that could happen. And so we just want to advise you that you may not be aware that you're in danger or in harm's way. And this person absolutely denies that help. Can they be forced to accept it, or that's up to them? I mean, does this bill give that that opportunity for service, whether they accept it or not? Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Ottman, we're going to assess the case, and we're going to work with that person. And if they get to a place where they say, I don't want your help, I don't need your help, we will then back off. However, if there is some concern that the person is mentally incompetent, danger to self or others, we may refer that to a Title 25, which is a psychiatric case, and that would go to the county attorney's office. But as far as the agency is concerned, yes, we respect that free will. We acknowledge that free will until there's potentially decision made of harm to self or others, and then we'll make the appropriate referral to law enforcement or to the courts.
But that bar is pretty high.
Madam Chairwoman, yeah, that bar is very high. Title 25 has strict requirements about the determination for that.
More questions for Director Schmidt? Representative Romero Martinez.
After an investigation has been completed, is it possible that a judgment will be made against the bad actor? And also, does this cover a more broad scenario? For example, regarding an estate of a large family. And I can give some more background.
So I guess just to make sure.
First question would be, so after the investigation has been completed and maybe it's not the guy from China, but maybe it's the grandson and the grandmother. And the grandson is taking thousands of dollars on a triple mortgage home or something like that, double mortgage home. And now we're not just talking about $10,000, we're looking at $150,000. Is there mechanisms in place, and I think the answer is yes, but that bad actor will be taken to task? I guess I wasn't very clear on that first question.
Dr. Schmidt.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Romero Martinez, we will refer that to law enforcement, and then law enforcement will follow its investigative procedures. It will make the determinations in consultation with the county attorney, and if charges will be pressed, and then the court system will take over. Our role as DFS is really just to help case manage. It's another person to help that vulnerable adult maneuver through the systems, but we don't have any enforcement capability with the antagonist or with the perpetrator.
And I withdraw my secondary question. I don't think I have it quite formulated what I want to ask on there.
More questions for Director Schmidt? So I do have, with the 10-day hold and given and the potential, of course, for it to be lengthened, with your current staffing, what's the time frame usually for you folks to be able to carry out an investigation after it's been referred to you? I mean, does that 10-day hold fit into your schedule or?
Madam Chairwoman, I'm going to refer, I think we have Jane. Is Jane on the line? Carlson. She is our Adult Protective Services Manager that works directly with our caseworkers. And I think she can speak a little bit more to the process of an investigation than I can. And I believe she should be raising her hand. Is she available?
Okay.
And she lives in Afton.
Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Yourself for general purposes, if you would.
I'm sorry?
Just introduce yourself for general purposes, if you would.
Of course. My name is Jane Carlson. I'm the Adult Protective Services Program Analyst for the Department of Family Services.
And were you able to hear my question? The bill has an initial potential of a 10-day hold from the financial institution, during which time they would have referred potentially a potential problem to DFS. And what I'm wondering is, as far as your folks' staffing and general procedures, if a bank called you up and said, we're worried about, Mr. Johnson and strange behavior, can you complete that investigation in 10 business days?
We do have some fairly strict timeframes. But the 10 days would probably be enough for us to look into it with law enforcement, of course. And it would be it would be enough for us to at least get a feel for what's going on. And as Director Schmidt was saying, our role is to speak with that vulnerable adult, speak with the vulnerable adult's family, really try to get in there and offer services. Madam Chairwoman, I hope that answered your question.
It does. And then just so as far as the process, and we haven't really heard from DFS and Adult Protective Services in a couple of years on this committee. So let's suppose I'm accompanied into the bank by my son-in-law, whom the banker does not know, and I have anxiety over whether the whole Russia-Ukraine thing is going to crash all the ATMs of the world, so I want to take out $5,000, and they send in a report on me. What happens then? Do you call my house, or do you come to my house, or what?
Well, we have 3 days to go and see the adult, Madam Chairwoman. That's in our timeframes, in our policy. It's also in our rules. We would then by then we would have contacted law enforcement. We do have to contact law enforcement immediately on any kind of an investigation case. But we would quickly be able to, again, with law enforcement, determine that this is not a financial exploitation case. If there were no concerns, if the adult told us, hey, this nephew of mine or son of mine or whatever, I'm sorry, I forgot who you said.
It's just a story.
Yeah, exactly. We would be able to quickly determine that it was not a financial exploitation concern.
So the Adult Protective Services person in Cheyenne and one of the local deputies would come to my house and inquire what I thought I was doing. I don't want to sound suspicious.
Madam Chairwoman, yes, that is what would happen. Just because we do take these very seriously, and we would err on the side of caution.
Okay, questions for, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. The lady in Afton. Carlton, that's right, good. No, Carlson, okay, good. No questions for Ms. Carlson. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, just keeping on time, 9:24, so we don't want to, there were no more questions for Director Schmidt? Okay, did you have one, Representative
I
Ottman?
just wanted to make a comment.
A brief comment. Remember,
Yes, very
question
brief,
time.
Very brief. I just wanted to say I'm glad to see everybody here today, and I'm glad that you have brought this bill. It is a problem, and it needs to be addressed and handled. Sometimes we find that these problems are going on and don't know what tools we can use to overcome that. So I appreciate this time with all of you and believe that we'll get what questions we need answered. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Just start coming up. We've got 3 chairs at a time. You can come up and sit next to each other unless you're worried about social distancing. Go ahead,
Madam Chairman.
introduce yourself for the committee if you would, please.
Bill Winnie, Sublette County. As one who, in reference to Representative Worf's thing, as one who made a Suburban go 600,000 miles, I have some other things that go along with it. When is help needed? Well, that depends. I observed my father, who passed away from emphysema, had a conversation with his cardiopulmonary physician. It turns out with emphysema, there is a 10-year slide in dementia. And so for the first couple of years, they seem very much capable, reasonable, but by the last 2 to 4 years, they're just in trouble. I saw my father-in-law pass away, veteran of World War II, Japanese prisoner of war camp. His slide was about a year. In both cases, I saw somebody, in one case a handyman, and in another case another person who wormed their way into their confidence, got control of the checkbook, $100 here, $200 there. We found this out after the fact. But the point was, in the case of the handyman and my father, it amounted to something over $15,000 across a good bit of time.
I'm seeing my son's mother-in-law right now down in Denver, had a stroke a couple years ago, seems very reasonable, very capable, very personable, but very clear in conversation if you pursue that she is not all there. The stroke took part of her reasoning, and she was a physician's assistant. So in each case, you're seeing things. Is it 10 years long? Is it 1 year long? How would DFS or whomever decide when to get in? I think the initial trigger is the bank. In the first two cases, we saw these checks, and they were even amounts, $100 or $200 or whatever, and there was a pattern. And that's perfect for a financial institution to be able to say, what's going on? Subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Okay, questions for Mr. Winnie? Okay, thanks very much.
Madam Chair, Committee, my name is Tom Laycock. I'm with AARP Wyoming. We are on and for the bill. Scams and fraud detection is kind of a big thing with us. Older adults, unfortunately, tend to be the targets of these scams quite a bit. So you'll see quite a bit from us, especially over the course of the next year, trying to help prevent scams and fraud before they happen. I know you guys, we like to send everybody scam alerts as we get them each month. Feel free to share those with your constituents because it's so much easier to address this on the front end than on the back end. That's the spirit in which we actually support this bill. We think that this offers specifically a method and a where and a how to report financial exploitation. This is a model bill we've seen in a number of other states, so we've been able to sort of digest it previously. And that said, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. Laycock? Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Bishop. I'm the Deputy Commissioner with the Division of Banking. We are a part of the Department of Audit. Just a bit of background on our division. We are the regulators for state chartered financial institutions, and we are the ones that administer Title 13, which this bill is a part of. Right now, we don't have any issues with the bill. As far as how we would administer it, one of the things we would look for is how we adjust our exam program of banks. And one of the things that we focus on with this bill is those policies and procedures. I think there's two different areas of how bank employees report activity, and then how the financial institution investigates those activities or makes the assessment, I think is the language, and then files the report with DFS. And then they also have to have policies and procedures on placing that hold for 10 days. So that's how we would adjust our exam program. We would include that program. I think we can successfully do that, but I wanted to stand for any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Bishop? So I do have a question, and thank you for coming, and I apologize for not bringing you up with the other agencies. We don't usually see the bankers before our committee, and I didn't recognize all. So this banking exam, see, I know nothing about it. Is this something that the bankers have to pass, or that you just evaluate when you renew their charter, and how often that is that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. So we have a mandate of every financial institution has to undergo, and it's called a safety and soundness examination, mostly every 18 months, sometimes every 12 months, and then sometimes we can do a visitation every 6 months. We have a full exam program that we have to review, among other things, but this would be included in that.
Great, very informative. We learn lots, don't we, in this committee? So then I have the second question I have is you talked about reporting and investigation. Do you have any thoughts or concerns about the definitions of, causing a person to act in a way that's inconsistent? We had something about, well, I guess just in the sense, and then whether the person acted in bad faith or malicious purpose. What would you see, or would you attempt to evaluate how the bank set up internally some sort of definitions or policy for their staff to help them decide when something is amiss, the word we used, or is that just the kind of thing like the Supreme Court talks about? I don't want to mention, but that you know it when you see it. Mr. Bishop.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have any issues with the definitions of what suspicious activity might be, just because it is a case-by-case basis. And so what we would look at in their policies, and then also in procedures, is what's their, how do they set their investigation or assessment process to, one, identify if it's suspicious, then, the teller would identify that to, let's say, the compliance officer. They'd have to make that assessment and determine if this should be reported. Since it's such a case-by-case basis, those definitions I don't have any issues with, just because it could vary significantly.
Okay, questions for Mr. Bishop? Great, thank you very much. Is there any more testimony on this bill? Is there anybody online, Donna? Nobody online? Did Representative Connolly ever show up online? Okay, good. Welcome, Representative Connolly. Okay, so no further question on the testimony, or I'm sorry, on the bill? Oh, was there something?
Madam Chair, I think Representative Connolly wants to say something, and I now have a hand up online from someone
Representative
else.
Connolly, are you just visiting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just letting you know that I'm here.
I'm glad you are, and I hope you feel better.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Donna, did you say there was someone else with their hand up?
Yes, I just admitted Cheryl Folland.
Okay. I'm sure they would have made themselves noticed. Ms. Folland, welcome back. Just introduce yourself anyway, but.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am at Cheryl Folland, Rollins, Wyoming. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I provide services to many vulnerable adults. In my area, we have seen, unfortunately, some of the same stories that have been shared, and I personally have been impacted. I unfortunately wish that this type of bill had been in place and my aunt may have died in peace, as opposed to dealing with having to hire attorneys and going through probate court, only to find that all of her funds were gone. So as a professional and as a person, member of our community, I encourage the committee to support this bill and also respect Representative Worf's and Stivar's questions, and believe that I think that this committee can certainly come to a consensus of amendments that would make this an appropriate bill for all Wyomingites. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Ms. Folland? Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Oh, okay, then public testimony is closed. Do I hear a motion on the bill?
Madam Chairman.
Was that a motion, Representative Stivar?
That's not a motion, Madam Chairman. This is comment. This is a great concept. I've talked to the co-chairman, and I believe this would be a great interim topic to go over and spend more time on to work it out. So I'll be a no on the bill.
Okay. Other than that, is there a motion on the bill?
Madam Chair, I would also like to comment. And I know you're trying to get it done, but I do have some concern over this. I look at this as an expansion of authority, and I worry about us cracking that door or letting the camel's nose in the tent. And I worry about what other groups can be identified that somebody's going to come forward and say, well, we should protect them. We should protect them. And I really do think that that's the concern I have. So I am also a no on this bill. For that reason is I'm concerned that we may not understand the complexity of this. I agree there's a problem. I would like to run the amendment. I think it makes the bill better, but I just want the committee to know that I am a no vote
Very good.
for
We
that
can't run
reason.
amendments until we have a
Yep,
motion
I
on the
know that,
bill.
Madam Chair.
Representative Hallinan.
I move the bill.
Okay, Representative moved by Hallinan, seconded by LeBeau. Okay. Now, any further discussion on the bill? Representative, let's just, I know you have a
you're okay.
amendment. I just want to check. Is there any broad discussion before we start working the bill? Representative Hallinan?
Madam Chairman, I asked the question whether there was a problem that was going to be addressed by this bill. And that was answered for me when they said that it brought a hold, it gave the hold to the bank when they see an issue. And I think that's an important thing that this bill has. And I think the other important thing is that it gives immunity to the bank in looking at these issues. I think they might be unwilling or less able to look at these issues if they didn't have immunity. So I think that this bill has two things that offer an improvement on the situation, and for that reason, I'm for it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
So, are there any amendments on the bill? Representative Worf?
Madam Chair, I would propose an amendment on page 8, line 8, to strike the word expires and add not to exceed in front of 10. So it would now read subsection A of this section, not to exceed, is not to exceed 10 business days. Right.
Okay. Representative Worf, we have Senator Case has it's a good thing I used to work with medical records. Has a friendly amendment. I think it's a friendly amendment. Because of the wording, there's if you back all the way up to the beginning of the sentence, to say, starting on line 7, this section shall expire not more than 10 business days. Because the up to, if you look at the grammar of the sentence.
That's not what I said, though, Madam Chair. I said,
restate what you said.
Is not to exceed. And I like my language better, nothing against the good senator, but I think it's clear that what I'm saying is if it's possible that they can get it done in less time, that they should do that.
Okay. So what if it says?
So I'll read it again.
Yeah.
We would strike expire, and it would now read, and I'm going to start from subsection A of this section, is not to exceed 10 business days after the date of the hold is placed.
Or perhaps shall not. I think we use shall not exceed. Would that be, is that the same?
That would work if that's your pleasure.
Let me just look. Because of the A, or the subject, let's just, is there a second for Representative Worf? Seconded by Ottman. Okay, let's just look at paragraph C to make sure that we've got the wording right.
Madam Chairman, can I have him repeat it, please?
Representative Worf.
Yes, starting on line 7 after the A of this section. Of this section, I don't know that I like that. Of this section shall not exceed 10 days.
Is that still what you meant?
It is, but I don't like the grammar. I think it.
Well, so if we back up to the beginning of 6.
Oh, I get it. Shall not exceed. I got it.
Section C, a hold of this, a hold shall not exceed 10 business days.
Yes.
But then we've got subject to C, which says it may extend.
And Madam Chair, I don't have a problem with that. I think section C is there that if there is a problem, and so I don't want to touch that. I'm just looking at if there's not, let's not hold it up for 10 days if we don't need to. So that's the amendment.
So we delete the word expires and insert shall not exceed.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that passes. Okay, any other amendments? Okay, then is a question on the bill? Bonnie, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Connolly.
Aye.
Flitner.
Aye.
Hallinan.
Aye.
LeBeau.
Aye.
Ottman.
Aye.
Romero Martinez.
Aye.
Stivar.
No.
Worf.
No.
Madam Chairwoman.
No. So that bill passes then?
Madam
6 to
Chairwoman,
3.
we have 6 ayes, 3 noes, the noes being Stivar, Worf, and yourself.
Okay, so committee, you will notice that Senator Case has no House co-sponsor. So those of you who voted aye, I would recommend you talk with Senator Case immediately following, if you have 5 minutes or so, or amongst yourselves. Anyway, we need someone to run the bill on the floor. So I hereby pick one of you 6. Well, we can talk it over and see who will have the best notes. Okay, committee, we'll be in time to gavel in. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Representative Connolly. Hope you feel better.